This is absolutely unthinkable. Triple H, the man who brought Drew McIntyre back to WWE, the man who personally vouched for Drew's return and championship push, the man who knows what it's like to be a top star carrying the company, just made the most heartbreaking and shocking decision of his tenure as head of creative by firing Drew McIntyre on live television after Drew's brutal assault on Jacob Fatu left the Samoan werewolf hospitalized with career-threatening injuries. And what makes this termination absolutely devastating is that it came directly from Triple H himself, not some corporate suit or storyline authority figure, but from the man Drew considered a mentor and friend, standing in that ring and telling Drew "you're fired," with what appeared to be genuine regret and pain in his voice. The bond between Hunter and Drew was real, which makes this betrayal cut so much deeper than any typical firing angle. I need you to drop a comment immediately if you think Triple H just made the worst decision of his executive career by firing one of WWE's most talented, loyal, and hardworking superstars over an incident that Drew was essentially provoked into by weeks of harassment and disrespect from Jacob Fatu. Drew McIntyre isn't some troublemaker or unprofessional performer, he's a consummate pro who stuck with WWE through the pandemic, who main event WrestleMania in an empty arena, who rebuilt himself after being released and came back better than ever. His reward for all that dedication? Being terminated by the man who was supposed to have his back, all because Drew finally stood up for himself after being pushed to his breaking point. But before I break down every emotional moment of Triple H's firing announcement, before I reveal the brutal attack that led to this decision and why some believe Drew went too far even by WWE's extreme standards, and before I expose the backstage civil war this has created with wrestlers taking sides and threatening to walk out if Drew isn't reinstated, you need to smash that like button if you believe Triple H betrayed Drew McIntyre and that this firing represents everything wrong with how WWE treats talent who give them everything. Because what I'm about to tell you about the real reasons behind this termination, the nuclear fallout happening in WWE's locker room, and the bombshell conversations between Drew and Hunter in the hours before this announcement is going to make you question whether Triple H is fit to run WWE's creative. Let me start with the attack that started this nightmare, because understanding the full context and the severity of what Drew did is essential to determining whether his firing was justified. The incident happened during SmackDown when Jacob Fatu was scheduled for a match against a lower-card opponent. Fatu had been on an absolute tear for weeks, destroying everyone put in front of him and running his mouth about being unstoppable. But Fatu's arrogance reached new levels when he started specifically targeting Drew McIntyre with increasingly personal attacks. Fatu mocked Drew's accent, his heritage, his previous WWE release, and most disgustingly, made comments about Drew's family that crossed every conceivable line. Fatu seemed to take pleasure in getting under Drew's skin, clearly trying to provoke a reaction. Drew had tried to handle the situation professionally, requesting official matches through proper channels, talking to producers about addressing the issue, even attempting to confront Fatu backstage in a controlled setting. But every time Drew tried to do things the right way, Fatu either avoided him or escalated the disrespect. WWE management did nothing to intervene, essentially allowing Fatu to continue his harassment unchecked. The explosion came during Fatu's match when Drew's music suddenly hit. Drew came storming down the entrance ramp with a look of pure rage that WWE cameras captured in disturbing detail. Drew's eyes were wild, his jaw was clenched, and every muscle in his body radiated fury. This wasn't worked anger, this looked genuinely unhinged. Drew entered the ring and immediately attacked Fatu from behind, dropping him with a claymore kick that echoed throughout the arena. But that was just the beginning of what would become one of the most brutal assaults in modern WWE history. Drew started stomping Fatu repeatedly, targeting his head, his ribs, his legs, just raining down boots with vicious intent. Fatu's scheduled opponent wisely rolled out of the ring to escape, and referees immediately rushed in trying to pull Drew away. But Drew fought off the officials, throwing them aside like they were nothing. Drew grabbed Fatu by the hair and dragged him to the corner, propping him up and delivering another claymore kick that sent Fatu crumpling to the mat. Security flooded the ring, but Drew was in his zone. He grabbed a steel chair from ringside and started delivering unprotected chair shots to Fatu's back and legs. The sound of steel on flesh was sickening. 1 shot, 2 shots, 3 shots, 4, 5, each impact more brutal than the last. Fatu was completely unconscious at this point, offering no resistance, but Drew kept attacking. WWE officials were screaming at Drew to stop, physically trying to restrain him, but Drew shrugged them off and grabbed Fatu's leg, placing it on the steel chair. The crowd gasped as they realized what Drew was about to do. Drew climbed to the second rope, looked down at Fatu's position leg, and stomped down onto the chair with his full body weight. The crunch sound made everyone in the arena wince. Fatu's leg bent at an unnatural angle, and even though he was unconscious, his body convulsed in pain. Medical personnel rushed to the ring, surrounding Fatu to protect him from further assault. Drew was finally restrained by a team of security guards who literally had to drag him away while he continued trying to get at Fatu. The aftermath was disturbing to watch. Fatu lay motionless in the ring, medical staff frantically working on him, calling for a stretcher. His leg was clearly damaged, possibly broken, and there were concerns about head trauma from the repeated strikes while he was already unconscious. This wasn't just a beatdown, this was an assault that had all the hallmarks of attempted murder. Now here's where Triple H enters the picture. Hunter was backstage watching everything unfold on monitors, and according to sources who were present, Triple H's face went pale as he watched the attack escalate. Hunter immediately called for Drew to be taken to his office, and he personally went to check on Jacob Fatu's condition. The medical report on Fatu was devastating. Initial examination suggested a broken leg that would require surgery, multiple contusions and lacerations, a possible concussion from the chair shots and claymores, and potential internal injuries from the stumps to his torso. Doctors told Triple H that Fatu would be out of action for months and might never be the same performer even after recovery. Triple H then had what sources describe as the most difficult conversation of his professional life with Drew McIntyre. Hunter called Drew into his office, and according to people who overheard parts of the conversation, it was emotional and heated. Triple H apparently asked Drew, "What were you thinking? I've defended you, I've pushed for you, I brought you back to this company, and now you've put me in an impossible position." Drew reportedly responded, "What was I thinking? I was thinking about weeks of being disrespected, harassed, and attacked with no support from management. I tried to do things the right way, Hunter. I came to you about Fatu's behavior. And what happened? Nothing. So I handled it myself." Triple H allegedly said, "I understand you were provoked, Drew. I get it. But you went too far. You could have killed Jacob Fatu. You attacked an unconscious man. You potentially ended his career. How am I supposed to defend that? The board is demanding action, legal is concerned about liability, and talent is scared that if you can do this to Fatu, nobody is safe." The conversation apparently ended with Triple H telling Drew, "I don't want to do this. You're like a brother to me. But I have no choice. I have to fire you, Drew. I'm sorry." Drew reportedly responded, "Then do what you have to do, Hunter. But know that I have no regrets about what I did to Fatu. He had it coming." The next segment on SmackDown became one of the most uncomfortable moments in WWE history. Triple H's music hit, and Hunter walked to the ring looking absolutely devastated. He wasn't in his usual suit, he was in casual clothes, suggesting this wasn't a planned segment but something he had to do immediately. Hunter grabbed a microphone and his hands were visibly shaking. Triple H's voice cracked with emotion as he spoke, "I need to address what happened here tonight with Drew McIntyre and Jacob Fatu. What you witnessed was, I don't even have words for it. It was one of the most brutal, most violent, most excessive attacks I've seen in over 30 years in this business." The crowd was silent, hanging on every word. Hunter continued, "As head of WWE Creative, I have responsibilities that go beyond just putting on entertaining shows. I have a responsibility to the safety and well-being of every performer under contract. What Drew did tonight crossed every line. He attacked an opponent who was already unconscious. He used weapons. He potentially ended Jacob Fatu's career with that leg injury. And despite my personal feelings about Drew, despite our history, despite how much I respect what he's contributed to this company, I cannot let this stand." Triple H paused, clearly struggling with what he was about to say. Drew McIntyre has been a champion in every sense of the word. He's worked through injuries, performed in empty arenas, represented WWE with class and professionalism. He's someone I personally recruited back to WWE. He's someone I consider a friend. But tonight, Drew showed a side of himself that I can't ignore and that WWE cannot tolerate. Therefore, effective immediately, Drew McIntyre's WWE contract is terminated. The crowd reaction was mixed, some people gasped in shock, others booed the decision, some actually cheered believing Drew deserved punishment. Triple H looked genuinely pained as he continued, "Drew, if you're watching backstage, I'm sorry it came to this. I really am. But you left me no choice. I hope you understand why I had to make this decision, even if you can't forgive me for it." Then Triple H did something unexpected, he called for Drew to come to the ring. "Drew, I know you're back there. Come out here. Let's handle this face to face like men." The crowd buzzed with anticipation, and after a tense few moments, Drew's music hit. Drew walked out slowly, still in his ring gear, his hands still wrapped from the attack. He looked defiant, not remorseful, as he walked to the ring. When Drew entered, he and Triple H stood face to face in a moment charged with history and emotion. These two men had known each other for years, had countless conversations about the business, had mutual respect. Drew grabbed a microphone. "Hunter, I don't need you to explain. I know what I did. I know I went too far. But I also know that Jacob Fatu pushed me to a breaking point where I stopped caring about consequences. He attacked my character, my family, my heritage. And when I tried to address it through proper channels, I was ignored. So yeah, I took matters into my own hands, and I'd do it again." Triple H responded, "Drew, I get it. I've been where you are, pushed to the limit, feeling disrespected, wanting to prove a point. But there's a difference between making a statement and trying to end someone's career. You crossed that line tonight, and now we both have to live with the consequences." Drew's response was chilling. "You want to fire me, Hunter? Fine. Fire me. But know this, you're not firing me for what I did to Fatu. You're firing me because you're under pressure from corporate, from legal, from people who don't understand what it means to be a wrestler. You're choosing politics over loyalty, and that tells me everything I need to know about who you've become since taking this job. Triple H looked like he'd been slapped. That's not fair, Drew, and you know it. This isn't about politics. This is about doing what's right. And as much as it kills me, firing you is the right thing to do. Then Triple H did something symbolic. He extended his hand to Drew for a handshake, a gesture of respect despite the circumstances. Drew looked at Hunter's hand for what felt like an eternity before finally shaking it. The two men locked eyes, and you could see genuine emotion from both. This wasn't just storyline, this felt real. Then Drew released the handshake, removed his WWE wrist tape, dropped it in the ring, and walked out. He didn't look back, didn't acknowledge the crowd, just walked straight up the ramp and disappeared through the curtain. Triple H stood alone in the ring, watching Drew leave, and cameras captured what looked like tears in Hunter's eyes. Whether those tears were real or part of the performance didn't matter, the emotion was palpable and made everyone watching feel the weight of what just happened. Now let's discuss the backstage fallout because according to multiple sources, WWE's locker room is in absolute chaos. Wrestlers are taking sides over whether Drew's firing was justified, and it's creating genuine tension backstage. One faction believes Drew got what he deserved for going too far, while another faction thinks Triple H betrayed Drew and that the firing sets a dangerous precedent. Kevin Owens is reportedly furious with Triple H and has been vocal backstage about his displeasure. KO and Drew are close friends, and Kevin views this firing as WWE punishing a victim who defended himself. Kevin allegedly told People, if Drew can be fired for standing up to harassment, then none of us are safe. What's next? We get fired for defending ourselves in matches? Sheamus is equally upset, considering Drew is practically family to him. Sheamus has apparently been lobbying Triple H to reconsider the decision, arguing that Drew's track record of professionalism should count for something. But Hunter has been firm that the decision is final, at least publicly. Roman Reigns had an interesting take according to sources. Roman allegedly said something like, I get why Drew did it, and I probably would have done the same thing. But Drew's mistake was doing it on camera in front of everyone. If you're going to hurt someone, be smart about it. This perspective shows the complicated ethics wrestlers navigate. Surprisingly, some wrestlers have supported the firing. A few performers who have worked stiff or unsafe in the past apparently see Drew's attack as crossing a line even by wrestling's extreme standards. They argue that attacking an unconscious opponent and potentially ending their career goes beyond working rough into genuine criminal assault territory. The women's locker room has been particularly vocal according to reports. Several female wrestlers have expressed that if Drew can be fired for excessive violence, WWE should apply that standard consistently to other performers who work unsafe or injure opponents. This has sparked broader conversations about workplace safety and equal enforcement of rules. Let me reveal some explosive information about the legal implications of Drew's firing. Drew's lawyers are apparently exploring multiple legal options including wrongful termination, breach of contract, and even defamation if WWE continues to frame him as dangerous or violent in ways that damage his reputation and future earning potential. Drew's legal team will apparently argue that his contract included protections for in-character actions and that WWE routinely features violence that equals or exceeds what Drew did to Fatu. They'll cite dozens of examples of brutal attacks in WWE history where performers weren't disciplined, let alone fired, establishing a pattern that Drew was treated differently and unfairly. There's also potential for Drew to argue constructive discharge, basically that WWE created a hostile work environment by ignoring Fatu's harassment, which essentially forced Drew into the actions that led to his termination. If Drew can prove WWE management was aware of Fatu's behavior and failed to address it, that strengthens his case significantly. The WWE legal team is apparently concerned about these potential lawsuits because Drew has a strong case on several fronts. There are discussions about potentially settling with Drew quietly, which might include a financial payout and an agreement that Drew won't disparage WWE publicly. But Drew has reportedly rejected early settlement offers, suggesting he wants his day in court or wants to be reinstated. Now let's talk about Jacob Fatu's actual condition versus what WWE has publicly stated, because there are major discrepancies that raise questions. WWE's official medical report stated Fatu suffered a broken leg requiring surgery, possible concussion, and internal injuries. This painted Drew's attack as potentially career-ending and justified the extreme punishment. However, multiple sources have reported seeing Fatu walking around backstage without crutches or any visible limp just days after the incident. These same sources claim Fatu's injuries are being exaggerated to justify Triple H's decision to fire Drew. If true, this would mean WWE is lying about the severity of Fatu's condition to protect the narrative. There are even rumors that Fatu is milking the situation, playing up his injuries because he knows it makes him more sympathetic and makes Drew look worse. Fatu has allegedly been overheard joking about getting Drew fired, which if true shows a level of manipulation that contradicts the victim narrative WWE is pushing. This creates an interesting scenario. If Fatu's injuries aren't as serious as claimed, does that change the justification for firing Drew? If WWE based their decision on Fatu being severely injured but those injuries were exaggerated, Drew's legal team could argue the termination was based on false information. Let me share some fascinating speculation about where Drew's storyline goes from here. The obvious trajectory is that Drew eventually gets reinstated after either legal action forces WWE's hand or Triple H reconsiders the decision after pressure from fans and wrestlers. Drew would return as a mega babyface with built-in sympathy from being wrongfully terminated. The dream scenario for fans would be Drew returning at a major event like Royal Rumble or WrestleMania, entering at number 30 or in some surprise capacity that creates a huge pop. Drew could then go on a tear through the roster, eventually facing Jacob Fatu in a blow-off match with massive stipulations like career versus career or loser leaves WWE. There's potential for Triple H to become heel authority figure as a result of the situation. If enough wrestlers and fans turn against Hunter over the Drew firing, WWE could position Triple H as an out-of-touch executive who's lost touch with the locker room. This would be a fascinating character turn for Hunter and could lead to compelling storylines. The wild card option is that Drew actually leaves WWE and shows up in another promotion. While WWE would never want this outcome, if negotiations break down badly, Drew has options. AEW would love to sign Drew McIntyre. Imagine the buzz of Drew showing up on Dynamite. NJPW would also be interested in someone of Drew's caliber. The threat of Drew actually leaving might force WWE to resolve this quickly. Make sure you're subscribed to WrestlingNewsCC with all notifications on because Drew McIntyre's firing situation is the biggest story in wrestling and we'll be covering every development. New information, legal updates, backstage reports, we'll have it all. Drop a comment right now with your thoughts. Did Triple H make the right decision firing Drew? Was Drew justified in his attack on Fatu? Should WWE reinstate Drew immediately? Is this all a work or are there real tensions? I want your perspective. Smash that like button if you think Triple H betrayed Drew McIntyre and that this firing is an injustice that needs to be corrected. Drew gave everything to WWE and deserves better than being terminated for finally defending himself. Share this video with everyone who needs to understand what really happened with Drew's firing and why it's such a controversial decision. This affects more than just Drew, it sets precedents for how WWE treats all its talent. This is Wrestling News CC, bringing you the truth about the most shocking firing in WWE history. Triple H terminated Drew McIntyre's contract after Drew's brutal attack on Jacob Fatu, but questions remain about whether this decision was just, whether Fatu's injuries are being exaggerated, and whether Drew will fight back legally or return triumphantly. One thing is certain, this story is far from over.